A very good afternoon, everyone. Every year since 1987, National Science Day is celebrated on 28th of February to honor the great Indian physicist Sir C.V. Raman, who won the Nobel Prize of Physics. It was on this day in 1928 his discovery of Raman effect came to light at Indian Association for Cultivation of Sciences, Kolkata. This breakthrough discovery brought the first Nobel Prize in Science for our country in 1930. Hence, the nation celebrates this as National Science Day, an important day for Indian scientific community. It is a day to innovate young minds and to impart scientific spirit. With this, I welcome every one of you to National Science Day celebration. Now may I call our chief guest, Professor Ullas Kolthur Seetharam, Director, DBT Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics, Hyderabad, and Dr. Prakash Kumar, Director, CSIR-NGRI, onto the dais, please. Now I request Ms. Shravya to welcome our chief guest with a bouquet made with flowers from our own NGRI garden. Now may I request Mr. Sarbaji to welcome Dr. Prakash Kumar with a bouquet. May I now request our chief guest, Professor Ullas Kolthur Seetharam, Dr. Prakash Kumar, Dr. Ajay Manglik, Dr. Abhay Bansal, and Dr. EVSSK Babu to please come and light the lamp. Now may I request everyone to please stand for NGRI anthem. Request Dr. Prakash Kumar, Director CSIR NGRI, to give opening remarks.
Chief guest, Professor Ullas Kolthur Seetharam Garu, Senior Scientist, CA, COFA, Scientists, Technical Officers, retiree, Harinaran Saab, people from online, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, my greetings to all of you on this National Science Day function. Today we have a very distinguished chief guest, Professor Ullas Ji from CTFD Hyderabad. He has a specialization in molecular physiology, chromatic and gene expression. On my personal behalf, on behalf of CSIR NGRI, first of all, I welcome him and I extend my really grateful thank to you, sir, for accepting our invitation in a very short duration of time and coming over here to grace this very important occasion. Professor, just I will appraise you in 1 minute. You are frequently visited to NGRI. I know you met me two to three times, couple of times, I think. But still, just I will, in 1 minute, I will appraise that CSIR NGRI as a geophysical institute where the techniques of all the geophysics exist here. We have a geological division also, and we work on to know the structure of Earth from surface to the center, earthquake hazard analysis, anticipation, mitigation, and also the resource exploration, R&D aspect of resource exploration, like hydrocarbon, oil, gas, and water. Extensive works now we have been carrying out on unconventional energy resources like gas hydrate, coal-bed methane, shale gas, and etc. Recently, we are focusing our attention towards the clean environment like CO2 sequestration and geothermal energy, prospect of geothermal energy in India. Friends, you all know that National Science Day is, as our anchor told, it is to commemorate the discovery of our great physicist, Sir C.V. Raman. And earlier of this month, Honorable Union Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh Ji released the theme of National Science Day 2024 as entitled as Indigenous Technologies for Viksit Bharat. Besides promotion of science and technology or innovation to the scientists, and it is also the theme also includes the appreciation of the scientists who face challenges in developing the indigenous technologies and also the difficulties they faced. Now you must be thinking that where our NGRI, CSIR NGRI will be fitting, because in Viksit Bharat, CSIR NGRI actually I will place as a top of the anyone, because without the exploration of resources, it is very difficult. It is not even an inch will move towards the development, because if the other technologies follow the exploration of resources, because as you know, any country or any society will be developed only when you have a continuous supply of resources. And since India is blessed with number of resources, we have a huge deposits, but now the demand is to explore it, go for different and innovative ways to explore it, because the superficial part only we have explored up to maybe less than 10%. There are much of the resources in the deeper part too, and also the geodynamic questions which we have. A lot of controversial, conflicting hypotheses exist. So these are the opportunities where only CSIR NGRI can, other than other labs. No, I think we do not have other labs which may question, which may answer such type of problems. Apart from this, CSIR NGRI also engage in outreach program, because they are the main stakeholders of our knowledge. We go by, recently, now we have been arranging one science exhibition in Rashtrapati Bhavan. As you know, few of our scientists, people are there for a science exhibition to disseminate our knowledge to the common man, what we are doing. So with this, I would only suggest you, my young scientist, that this is the day when you should inspire yourself to pursue to set up a goal in science. You should set up a problem in science so that you can have a meaningful, I think, the discovery, a meaningful discovery, meaningful life you'll have. Because after all, this is the platform, CSIR-NGR, this is a research platform where other than this place, you may not get the infrastructure, the benefits, the experience of our senior scientist elsewhere in this country in geophysics. Also, I can say in the globally, because I've seen in many places in the world, because here is the most latest, most the literature the literature available in this institute is, I think, far more better than any other else. The library is, as you have seen, is probably the best library in this country for art science people. So I request you to contribute from your side with the best of your ability, best of your knowledge, and come up, think something big, think something new, and contribute to this institute and in special case to our whole country. Because routine work, anyway, will continue, we'll do it. But thinking something different is, in fact, is a new thing. That will make your life different, and that will fetch you a fame in your future. So I can only say that science is the belief in ignorance of an expert. With this, I end my talk here. I again thank to our chief guest, who in fact spared his time, very valuable time, and agreed to come here to this very important function of this institute and also for this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for encouraging all the young minds to work harder and to contribute to scientific community. Now, may I request Dr. Ullas Kolthur Seetharam, Senior Principal Scientist, CSIR-NGRI, to introduce today's chief guest.
Thank you, Professor Ullas and Dr. Prakash, and then all the senior colleagues in the audience. I'm really, it's a really privilege to introduce Professor Ullas Kolthur Seetharam. He's right now currently director at the Center of DNA Fingerprinting Diagnostics of DBT. He was, prior to this, he was a professor at Department of Biology at TIFR, Tata Institute for Human Research. And Professor Ullas is very much well known for his work on metabolics and energy hematosynthesis, which play a vital role in bonding cellular pathways. His primary research interest, I gathered from, is on serotonins and linking metabolism to aging and cancer, or some of the very hot topics in the fields of biochemistry. Their group uses flies, mice, and cell culture systems to elucidate molecular mechanisms that regulate serotonins. And their research has large implications on cancer, diabetes, and obesity, and aging problems, and etc. Professor Ullas obtained his MSc from Bangalore University, PhD from Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore, and he did a long postdoctoral stint at Strasbourg, France, and then again joined back at TIFR, and then he was instrumental in establishing the TIFR Hyderabad, and so many national level programs he leads. And then he got all the fellowships of national fellowships. He is member of all elected fellow of all the fellowships. He was also a Swarnajayanti fellow of DST. He is recently selected to J.C. Bose Fellowship of DST again. He's editorial board of he's an editorial board member of very important journals in the field of molecular biology and biochemistry, like General Biosciences, Molecular and Cellular Biology, and Journal of Biological Chemistry and FASCP Journal, etc. And the most important programs that he is now currently leading is, or led, is that COVID-19 serum survey, large-scale serum survey that he has conducted with Niti Aayog and BMC as key partners. And then, very interestingly, he's also associated with ISRO, with Gaganyaan space biology initiatives. So where I think they're trying to understand the effects of gravity, microgravity on the space travels. Then National Analytical Facility for Nutrition and Metabolism Research, and famously the ARMUDA, Advanced Research Unit on Metabolism and Development and Aging. This is a very large-scale program, a mega program, that is aimed at bringing in the gap between basic biologists and clinical researchers to mitigate the double burden of malnutrition in the country. I mean, it's really one of the big problems of our country right now, malnutrition. So I think some of the research areas which Professor Ullas is engaged in is something outstanding. And then I think his contributions are going to really change the scape of the landscape of this country. And we are fortunate, our group, Dr. Babu and others, to involve with him in some way or the other, like we are doing, trying to help him in metallomics part of this research, and then some isotopes part, and then so that'd be really interesting, sir. And then he has a patent, and I think not to take too much of time and from you, so I request now Professor Ullas to take this.
And of course, it's a happy National Science Day to everyone. When I was growing up, I grew up 1 foot away from where C.V. Raman lived in Bangalore. Little did I realize that I would end up as a scientist. I was barely 3-4 years old. The trees that he had planted, benefits of the work that he had put up. Bangalore, and if you are ever in Bangalore, please go and visit it. Now turned into a museum. Fantastic place. Inspiration to do that. From where I come from in TIFR, in fact, I think it was the dramatized version of Bhabha's life is the Rocket Boys, but I would like you to really read the life and of works of Homi Bhabha. Homi Bhabha was inspired by C.V. Raman. C.V. Raman is the one who suggested that Bhabha should use all of his entrepreneurship and energy and such a youngster to establish a new institute and not waste his potential in IISc being one more faculty. The inspiration that Raman provided, and then that's what Bhabha actually followed. So with that, I'll start. Not often that probably you will get a biologist to talk to you. It's not often that a biologist will go to a researcher. So fit, and I would like to emphasize, particularly given that what Dr. said, thanks to all of them for inviting me here. It's been barely a week since I took over as a CDFT director. Of course, I'm just learning the system. I said I should not this opportunity to go by because they've become now good friends, and then there's again always good to connect sciences which apparently doesn't connect with each other. The reason I say that is if you think about Vikasit Bharat, is the theme of this year. Bharat cannot happen unless life on Earth taken care of, whether it is the ecological system or the human system. Say life on Earth, Earth becomes important, and that's what NGRI comes into picture. Everything that happens here, in fact, life evolved, where else it evolved, but at least we know it evolved on Earth. Most of evolution has been driven by bottlenecks that offered because of environmental conditions and what with Earth itself. the ecosystems, whether it is the amount of water that you get, the kind of land, altitudes, everything is all about geophysics. Therefore, life and geophysics are actually not at the opposite end of science, but probably they're the closest related thing, because whatever happens to geophysics directly impacts life. That I'll start. Thank largely TIFR, because most of our work has happened in TIFR. CDFT is a recent thing. Now to think about the country needs, right? Of course, indigenous technologies matter and technology is important. What we fail to recognize is the importance of human potential. Human potential is the biggest limitation for any technological advancements to happen, or even if you have a technological advancement, to reap the benefits of the technology, you still need the human potential. In some sense, it's a circular economy, so to speak, where economy leads to innovation, innovation leads to human potential, and then it goes back in the circle. If you think about people who don't care about human life, people think is that we are not a developed economy, and as long as economy develops, we can't reap the human potential. World Health Report now says that you can't wait for the country to become developed from a GDP perspective. What is required is to elevate human life, and only if you elevate human life can you get better economy. In fact, if you want to become a developed nation, you have to take care of the human growth potential or the growth index. This is where human capital comes in. Right now, we'll talk about this. We have the largest and youngest working population with a median age of 29, which is right now. All of this population will become older at some point of time, which means aging becomes an issue. Human capital, like I said, is, if you have good human capital, it leads to productivity. If you have bad human capital, it leads to loss. All of this ultimately is related to your intellectual and physical capacity or the disease burden. Most of biology research, which is anthropocentric, not all biology research is anthropocentric, but the ones that is anthropocentric has to deal with enhancing intellectual and physical capacity and reduce disease burden. Where what I'm going to largely talk about today becomes relevant, which is double and triple burden of malnutrition. Not worry about this very broad schematic, pictures. Let's think about hard data that exists in India right now. This is just a graph of, I'm sure you'll not be able to read any of this. I'm sorry for that, but suffices to say that there is a concept or a numerical called DALI. DALI is called disability, adjusted life years. When people think about the cost in human life as being death, it's true. For example, cancer kills you. There are diseases that doesn't kill you but leads you into a disabled state, like obesity, diabetes, blindness, neuropathy, gangrene, all of those things. Stroke. These are called disability adjusted life years. So if you look at it, one is the number of years you live, the other is the number of years you live with a disability. Combine those two, you get what is this called as a DALI score. Look at the DALI score, the major DALI is childhood and maternal malnutrition. Three risks: anemia, lipidemia, consumption of sucrose. All of these are something that we all relate to because it's become a norm these days. If you say I'm not diabetic, people will say, are you really not diabetic? Because it's supposed to be that it's normal to become diabetic. People have forgotten that being non-diabetic is normal, it is a disease, right? Therefore, if you think about all of these, both in men and women, you see that malnutrition and your dietary risks have higher risk of developing disabilities in life, higher risk of death. And it's not surprising because we all can relate this. Why? Simply economic growth is not important. It's important to also take care of the human health and understanding biology that governs human health. The reason this becomes relevant is that as the economic progress happens, our accessibility and consumption of processed food is also increasing. It means we are consuming more and more of processed food, consuming more of beverages, we are consuming more of all of those sugary stuff. We are consuming more high calorie diet because we are getting more access to food because we are economically getting better. Ideally, simply growing economy should have solved all our problems. Not going to solve all our problems by simply becoming rich as a country. You also have to take care of the human population. The WHO report says that the amount or the the sales of fast food in India is much higher than any of the unprocessed foods, which indicates that we are actually consuming more unhealthy diets. That means economic progress is one thing, your human potential is another thing. Unless you take care of human potential, even if you become rich, you're going to spend a lot of money on taking care of health, and you invest a lot of your human potential and capital in terms of money that goes into healthcare in hospital bills and other stuff. As a family and an individual, you can relate to this. Why are metabolic diseases on the rise, right? So let's talk about this because, like I said, unfortunately, all of us will relate to this. There is no individual in this room, which is sad, who doesn't know another individual who is diabetic or has hypertension. That's the sad state of affairs today. Why is metabolic disease on the rise? Now, metabolic disease on the rise, I'll tell you about some possible causes, but metabolic diseases are also emerging as the biggest risk factors for cancer. People think that alcohol and smoking is biggest risk for cancer. If you actually think about it, in a lack of exercise, high calorie diet, and all of these put together will trump the risk associated with cancer. In fact, obesity is now one of the biggest risks for developing cancer all over the world. Thought genetics is the biggest driver of metabolic diseases. Yes, genes give you certain risk factors to develop diseases. This is true for all diseases. Turns out that from, let's say, 1900s to 2000s, the risk of developing obesity has increased. Our genes have not changed in the last 100 years. Evolution happens at a much slower pace. Why are we becoming more and more diabetic? Why are we becoming more and more prone to cardiovascular diseases? That's where the impact of environment or lifestyle becomes important. It's the lifestyle that we are leading, which is making us more susceptible to diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular diseases. It's not just the genetics. Of course, genetics plays a significant role. Ask why is this happening? And of course, now I'll give you a slightly popular talk based on the thing so that I can connect with you, and I'll go back to the data, right? Of course, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of biology data, but I'll show you where things matter or relevant. I would call this a self-domestication. We were also wild animals not so long ago, right? Let's say if you talk about hundreds of thousands of years ago, we were also wild, right? We were not this. I believe that we became self-domesticated. And in fact, now the question is, can we go back and ask our ancestors why they were healthier and why we are unhealthy, right? So of course, we can do that, but there's no point in doing it because we can't go back and start living in caves because, right? These days, you can't even live without an AC. So that means there's no point in going back and asking what was different there, which is going to be different, is going to give us solutions for this particular case. There have been a lot of studies to look at whether it's the type of diet that you take. That means, are you a vegetarian? Are you eating a lot of meat? Are you eating a lot of starch? Of course, there is some basis to that where certain kinds of meat, certain kinds of sugary compounds will give you higher risk for developing obesity, diabetes, or becoming accelerated aging. But turns out that this is only a minor contributor again, and that means it matters, but there is a lot more that is associated with this. In fact, people have figured out, this is also a political debate, right? Do you want to be a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian? I don't want to go here because I want to go back home safe from here. So, but turns out that if you look at even tribes around the world, that there are currently tribes which have remained tribal. In fact, even in India, if you actually see in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, some islands have retained their tribal origins, right? Similarly, in Africa also, you have a lot of these tribes that have retained their tribal identities. If you look at that, some are vegetarian, some are non-vegetarian. Some are largely seed and plant-based, some are largely meat-based. But if you look at the disease risk, when they become industrialized and then they become civilized, it seems to be similar. Yes, there is something about, beyond simply calories and beyond simply whether you're a meat eater or a plant eater, you're becoming more diabetic and obesity. That means, by that logic, all meat eaters should have died by now. Only vegetarians should have survived. that's not the case, right? So that means there's an argument against. Popular trend now about time of the day eating. In fact, people do what is called intermittent fasting. I'm sure, I don't know if you have followed. There's a benefit of that. Definitely there is a benefit of that. Almost all mythological practices, all religious practices invoke this. Whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu, there are these practices which forces you to fast once in a while, right? So there are some benefits to that. So people think about whether it's the time of the day that you eat. True, there is some concept there. This is something that's happening over a shorter period of time. That means every day you feed and fast, feed and fast, feed and fast. That's one of the component of my. Also feed and fast over your lifetime. That means there are seasons when you get a lot of food. There are seasons when you don't get a lot of food. That means imagine when we were all wild, let's say, we would not get equal amount of food in all the seasons of the year. There would be some seasons where you would be feeding or feasting. In some other seasons you would be fasting. That means you would not have access to diet. So biology has to deal with these two problems. One is daily availability of food, is long-term availability of food. This biology, like artificial intelligence, right? It has to juggle all the numbers about food availability to say, when do I eat, when do I fast, or I don't get excess food, say after rainy season I get. So you need to maintain this. So there are what are called feast famine cycles that are also evolved. So that means our physiology has evolved over a period of time to make sure that we didn't have access to food all through the day. We also didn't have access to food all through the year. We went through feed and said one of the things that has obviously emerged is that eating fast food is that is why we are becoming diabetic. Now let's say all know that we are all supposed to be intelligent beings, right? We are supposed to know that something is bad. Still, given a choice, all of us would pick up a cake and not a Karela, right? Why is this? Why, despite being intelligent beings, our brains are fooling us to eat or drink high calorie diet and not resist that? Is this concept of, I mean, I didn't introduce here because I thought I would not go into too generalized things, but I'll say this. The human biology also works like a banker. Right? That means the evolutionarily what you have evolved is that never had full access to food. The animal does not have access to food every day, all through the year. Them to eat as much as possible when food was available. Means our behavior, everything is trained to think that when you have food, consume, because you don't know when you're going to get next. This is the behavior that is making us still consume a lot of high calorie diet, despite being the intelligent beings where we should be resisting diet, correct? That's a hypothesis, and there's a large amount of data to support that. Ultimately, what matters is whether we are paying the price for evolutionary conspiracy. That means we became evolved because we could extract more nutrients. Fire, you could not extract more nutrients. That fire helped us to grow our brains, and that brains is what made us more intelligent. That is a very well proven hypothesis in biology now. If we didn't have this brain size increase, we would all remain apes, right? The fact that our brains became bigger show that we had more intelligence. That means, are we paying an evolutionary conspiracy that we are supposed to eat a lot because we are supposed to evolve? That's why we're also becoming sicker. Is it also how much of eat or when to eat? The combination of all of these, and it's a nightmare for a biologist to say what's happening and to tease out why are we becoming sicker, because our industrialization has happened much more rapidly than evolution. So to understand why our physiologies have changed so rapidly, it's not an easy thing. So that's why, despite being somebody who does this on a daily basis, I can't give a ready-made answer for all of us, because understanding this is not an easy thing. Now, first about metabolism, right? So metabolism is something that all of us worry about. You would have heard about in different contexts. Metabolism is important because it's also the metabolism that encodes information in biology. Like I said, remember what we ate 100 years ago is what is making us sicker now, right? Because memory said you're not supposed to eat every day. Now we are eating every day. So that means there's a conflict. So it's actually the metabolism that is encoding information. And for people who may be interested in biology, we work with what is called a nucleus, which is present in the cell, and a mitochondria that actually produces energy to allow the biology to function. In fact, biology also, energy is actually very important for biological systems, right? And that's something that we study. This because I think it will become a little too much of biology. We have done a lot of work, as Dr. Srinivas introduced. We work with flies, we work with mice, we work with humans. We've done a lot of work from across fields or domains in biology. We have been one of the largest, spread out groups in terms of what we can do. One of the things that we have asked is, how does physiology oscillate? Like I said, when you're sleeping, your physiological state is something. When you're waking up, your physiological state is something. When you're feeding, there is one state. When you're fasting, one state. Biology has to go through these oscillation cycles, right? You have to oscillate. If you don't oscillate, if you go from state A to state B, this I'm sure you will understand. You have to come back to A. Oh, the an emergent property. Means every time an oscillation happens, if I build small error, loses its memory of where it came from, therefore error accumulates over a period of time. Aging could be an accumulation of error over an entire life period is what we are proposing. That's now coming to be accepted in the field, that aging is not a catastrophic event that happens in somebody's life. It's small errors that accumulate in daily life, and that error is what enlarges over a period of time, and that's why you get diseases or become obese or diabetic or become sick. There's a lot of papers in this, and again, this is for somebody who can think about biology. You'll relate to this. Say if you fundamentally think about it, suppose I don't know what the director is going to feed us after this particular talk. I'm going to provide Dr. Prakash is going to give us nice sweets or samosa or whatever, right? About it, if you eat exactly the same amount of calories, some of us will gain weight, will not gain weight. Why do some of us become obese with the same amount of nutrients that we are eating? Why do some of us don't become obese? It's $1 million question. Biologists don't have an answer yet. That is one of the research programs that we are pursuing. Why is this important? Build body, like this, our body is nothing but derived from all the elements that you have on Earth: carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, potassium, sodium, name it, you have it. This thing is hydrocarbons, because that's what it's all made up about. It's all about organic matter. Build organic matter, you need energy, you need reducing potential, right? Because you can't make bonds if you don't have reducing potential. I hope organic chemists in the agree? Can't make bonds without the reducing potential, right? So it is the reducing potential. Now, if I give you nutrients, nutrients have both carbon chains, reducing equivalents, and energy. Question is, how much of that nutrients will you use to make body mass? How much of that nutrients will you use to burn, produce energy? That's the problem. If I give all of us the same nutrients, some of us will only build body mass. Yes. Some of us will bring a lot of energy, will remain thin, we will never become obese. Why do some of us put on body mass, and why do some of us burn calories is fundamentally the problem about how do you regulate growth, how much of energy has to be used and expended and used for all our activities. This is like the holy grail of biology in some sense for all biological systems, much more relevant for humans. Stop me if you want to ask any questions in between. I don't want, if you have a question that I have to clarify, I'll be happy to clarify. Let's not wait for the end of the talk. Thyroid is a hormone that actually activates mitochondria, burn more energy. To have thyroid, hypothyroidism is associated with what is called basal metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate is how much of energy you produce. That is done by mitochondria. So thyroid actually activates cells to use energy so that you can function. If you have a thyroid problem, the energy is perturbed. Therefore, instead of burning, you store. Simple, you're going to be putting your money in a mutual fund or an FD or a current account. Is exactly the same problem. If I'm eating something, am I going to put it in a current account so that I burn it, so therefore I don't store? Or I'm going to put it in a mutual fund where it is risky, but I can use it whenever I want? Or I'm going to lock it in FD where I simply pile a lot of money and I don't care what is that. Basically, what is called an energy economy in the body that happens every day, and we don't understand how this is being calculated by the biological system. I don't know how many of you do exercise. If you don't, please do. If you do, good. I did take the stairs when I went to Dr. Prakash's room in there, but of course he forced me to come by the lift here. Reason I'm highlighting this particular aspect is because that's something that you might be able to relate to, right? All exercise is important. In fact, without exercise, your muscles undergo what is called atrophy. Muscle actually decays. You lose muscle mass very, very rapidly. In fact, this is one of the risk factors associated with hospital-related deaths. People now have come to realize that lack of exercise, which reduces muscle mass, muscle also produces all of these chemical signals that even tell the brain what to do. Something called muscle myokines that are released as small signaling molecules that get from the muscle and activate everything else. If you don't exercise, in fact, unfortunately in India, people don't recognize it. In the West, even people who are in the ICU, they are made to exercise even when they are on a ventilator because that dramatically improves survival because their physiology becomes much better. Otherwise, again, you accumulate a lot of food, you're not burning it, it becomes a problem, right? Why did COVID kill? Because overall physiology was bad, starting bad state, and virus took this as an opportunity to kill us more. Healthy individuals didn't die, so that was an obvious thing. Similarly, many hospital-related deaths can be related to this. So time of the day exercise is important. All of us, I don't know, like I said, if you go to a gym or if you go for a run, the question is, when do you do this? Do you want to run in the morning? Do you want to run in the afternoon or in the evening? That's an important question. Emerging literature has shown that your muscles also go through what is called a circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm, I think the physicists also will understand because it's the light and dark based on the availability of light and not availability of light. Almost all biological systems on Earth have been tuned by light and dark cycles. So when you have light, your physiology is something. When you're dark, your physiology goes through. Again, that's an oscillation that happens every day in our life. In every organism, probably exception is the deep sea organism, which doesn't see much light. Otherwise, almost every other organism is tuned by this. This is called circadian rhythm that is operating in all of us. The other reason why we are probably also becoming unhealthy is because we are now disregarding the circadian rhythm. We continue to be exposed to light even during durations when we are not exposed to light. We are constantly glued to TVs, mobile phones, computers, even at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the night, or we are doing more shift workers. I'm not saying shift working is bad, but I'm saying that there should be a limit to which you will work on a shift, and you cannot continue to be working only at night shift, because that again creates a biological problem, right? Now, so that means exercise becomes relevant. I'm not going to go into the details of all the molecular mechanisms, but there are a lot of molecular mechanisms that have shown that of exercise, circadian rhythm, physiology, metabolism, all of these are connected. One of the things that people have shown is that, I don't know if you have tried it, please, if you don't, if you have not, maybe you should try it. This is a motivation for all of those people who don't exercise. You run in the morning and run in the evening. You'll realize that your muscle capacity is different in the morning and evening. Been well documented. Human studies, mice studies, all animals show some kind of a differential muscle capacity in the morning and evening. If you run at a particular time of the day, you will feel less fatigued. You can run longer. You can do more exercise. The same individual at another time of the day feels more fatigued. Right? You're the same individual, right? It doesn't change. So what changed? It's not that you ate a gulab jamun the previous night. You can do this 100 days. In all of those 100 days, you will realize that your muscle capacity is better in the evening or morning. You don't understand why your muscle capacity is different in the morning and evening. That is something that we thought we will ask. Now, the moment you talk about muscle capacity, muscle is a contractile organ. It's nothing but a machine. It's a molecular machine. Contracts, it's basically like a piston that is working, right? Contracts, relaxes, contracts, relaxes. Your ability to work, my ability to even talk is because my muscles are contracting. Contraction is energy demanding, is energy dependent, right? Thermodynamics, basic fundamental laws of physics. If I have to use, make something move, I need to get energy. Energy inside the cells are all obtained from mitochondria. I think if you remember your 10th class or 12th class biology textbook, you'll relate it's the mitochondria that provides all your energy. We asked a simple question: does mitochondria behave differently in the evening and morning? And whether the ability to produce energy is different at these times of the day, and is that what is limiting the muscle to become more active or less active in the morning or evening? So I'm not going to go into a lot of details. Of course, we do a lot of work with humans. I'm not showing the human data. This is done in collaboration with both CMC Vellore and another institute in Netherlands where we are doing these studies, but I'm going to show data from mice. You can take mice and make them run on a treadmill. Yeah, biologists have made a treadmill for mouse as well, right? We can make them and they run. We can even put them elevation so that, this cardiometabolic thing also we can do. When we make the mice run on a treadmill, at a particular time of the day, they run better. At another time of the day, they run less. The same mouse, no change. I can do this 100 times, exactly the same data. What is changing? Why is this mouse doing better exercise in a particular time of the day and not the other? We show it's all got to do with mitochondrial function. Is the ability to produce energy in the mitochondria is different in the morning and evening. We don't know why that is. At least we have inched one step closer. Ultimately, what we show is that this is what happens. And let's say if this is of course for a normal healthy individual. I make the mouse or humans exercise only at a particular time of the day and get better physiological effects. That means, can I not become diabetic at all? Should I exercise in the morning or evening? So we have done that the experiment. We make this mouse either run only in the morning or evening for a month. Every day the mouse runs for a short period only in the morning and evening, and we compare which of these mice don't become diabetic. We find that the time of the day exercise matters. If the mouse exercise either in the morning or evening, the ability to metabolize glucose or fat is completely different. All of you have to think, first of all, exercise. Second of all, think when do you want to exercise. Okay, that's very important. I'll stop the science part here and I'll go back to the national mission. I'll pause here if you have any particular question and I can answer. Wanted to cleverly escape from there. So it turns out that if you're a healthy individual, eating time is a better exercise time. Mice, they do better early in the morning, but because mice eat all night, they are nocturnal. Once exactly the same thing has been shown. Muscle capacity is better later in the evening, afternoon. So after 4, the muscle capacity is much better. It's the ability to utilize either glycogen or glucose or fat, because both are energy rich molecules. You can use it either this. It's almost like saying I have diesel and petrol. Which one do I use? Right. So the mitochondria are also choosing, should I use fuel A or fuel B, which is better? In fact, there's also a difference: fast running versus slow running. That's also an amazing thing. So in a normal healthy individual, seems to be that morning or mice morning or humans late in the afternoon seems to be better. But if you're obese or if you're diabetic, all of this might change. Also depends on on how frequently you feed and when did you feed last. Is based on your individual physiology, but generally late afternoon for humans seems to be better. Better, of course. I mean, first of all, walk. See, I'll tell you, no walk and walk is huge difference. Morning walk or evening walk, there is a small difference. Walk is important. It's also interesting. Again, I usually relate to what happened in evolution. In evolution, we would, so you also see more and more people dying on treadmills. Because all kinds of theories exist. I don't know whether which of these is true or not. My perspective is very simple. Supposed to do what is called exercise, marathon exercise. Imagine when you were a caveman, in the morning, you would probably do very short bursts of activity to get a prey so that you could eat. Afternoon, you would go for a longer stretch so that you could capture food for storing and utilizing later. If you do opposite, because it also builds a lot of stress. Excess exercise also is damaging. Again, is important. So people don't realize how much of muscle mass you have. To have poor muscle mass, exercise improves muscle mass, but too much exercise actually creates detrimental effect because the muscle gets damaged. So there's all of these unanswered questions still we don't understand. We have just begun to scratch the surface yet. That question. First exercise. Then we'll worry about when or. Not a photosensitive gland, there's something called a pineal gland where your eye gets the thing, your retinal nerve feeds to that. There's something called a central clock and a peripheral clock. Central clock actually tunes your circadian rhythm to light and dark cycle. Your peripheral clocks are autonomous clocks. You can isolate cells and grow in culture, show a circadian rhythm. Amazing biology. Problem that in fact people are thinking about. In fact, if you have flown in flights these days, the lighting conditions are considered to be a major determinant. Your blue light or white light is very dangerous. The red light is much better, right? So your lightings are also being controlled. Hotel industry is investing millions of dollars circadian biology because people are traveling. They're going from one time zone to another time zone. What is called also jet lag problems, right? When you do this, what kind of lighting you have also influence your physiology. That's a major industry there, actually. Won't become extinct. It is always important because sensing light is a fundamental requirement of all biological systems. trying to do becomes relevant, right? I'll come. Good. It's a real fundamental question. That's what I said. The problem is what we have done is we have taken, I'll come to that. We have taken understanding of human biology particularly comes from what people described in a Caucasian population, which is largely the white male, not even white female, right? This was research that was done in the West a long time ago, and all our standards are based on that. Applied to humans in India, it's not going to apply. So it depends on also your history of nutrition when you were young. I'll come to that. Okay. All of us also have a history of nutrition when we were young, and that's also going to influence now. Okay. Maybe I'll go through the section and then maybe you'll be able to appreciate that better. Okay. So hyper and hypothyroidism is clearly associated with BMI, but it's a lot more complicated than that. If it's only lean, touch upon this, lean is actually not the best thing. Okay. There's something called body composition that becomes more relevant. So body mass index is not relevant. So I think I'm running short of time. I'll finish that. We can do it with the treat that Dr. Prakash is giving us. So we said, look, we are working in this kind of domain. And when I came back to India, there was nobody working on mitochondria. Right now, we have lots of groups. Probably the only lab that was working on molecular physiology and metabolism using mouse and flies and everything. So of course, now right now we have a lot of people. And when you establish, say like, okay, why should you only? This is of course fundamental discoveries are important. Fundamental discoveries, if possible, has to relate to society. Not every fundamental discovery has to relate to society. There is a merit in intellectual curiosity, and that is pure, and that should remain. But if there is an option, fundamental discovery relating to society, you should also not miss that opportunity. So both are equally important. TIFR particularly has lived up to that. Bhabha, when he started TIFR as Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. He didn't call it as translational research. However, every aspect of TIFR has been translational. Did bomb, did this. TIFR did it. When I say TIFR, without TIFR, BARC would not have been born. Without BARC, DAE would not have been born. So flew what is called AstroSat. I don't know how many of you know. TIFR collaborates a lot with ISRO. We actually manufactured and assembled one of the first or the only X-ray satellite in India and the third in the world. And we flew with ISRO. We have what is called a balloon facility here in Hyderabad. It studies stratospheric things, higher atmosphere. Only TIFR does it. And again, it's probably only 5th or 6th such center all over the world. That means we do fundamental discoveries. Where possible, we apply it to human science. And I said, I don't want to retire only publishing papers. Of course, I'll continue to publish hopefully until I retire. But simply retiring with publications is not important. If you have a chance, you should translate. This is something that we started. It is led with both me and my friend and colleague called Mahendra. We have a website. We have multiple organizations together, and this is called Arubda. Arubda is mission to empower researchers, technologists, policymakers, community health partners to tailor interventions, supplementations to populations across age groups. A lot of things to say, right? Why are we talking about this? We're talking about this, of course, this is the number of people we have and all the board and everything. This is the concept of malnutrition. I don't know how many of you know this. Malnutrition in India is much worse than malnutrition in Africa. It's a shame. We are in the 21st century and we are much better economically when compared to Africa. It's worse in India because we have what is called mild to moderate malnutrition. In Africa, you have what is called severe malnutrition. That means you see the person, you know that person is malnourished. There's a difference between undernourishment and malnourishment. Rich people are malnourished. Rich people are malnourished because rich people consume only high-calorie diet. Malnourishment is improper nutrition. not lack of nutrition. Lack of nutrition is undernutrition. So in India, what's happening is that you have poor people and economically rich people. All of us are equally malnourished. In fact, I was surprised when now we are connected with multiple hospitals. In rural hospital in Konkan, which is connected with 200 villages, apparently children there, because they don't have money to drink milk, they're drinking fish. Of school-going kids consume 100 ml of fish drinks every day. Of kids do not drink milk every day. That means your protein malnourishment and sucrose overfeeding nourishment. Now go to IKEA, go to malls. All the people who come in Mercedes-Benz or whatever have the same problem. They're eating Coke, they're drinking all of that. Is there a difference? No, it's the same malnourishment. Malnourishment is known to be very critical because what you ate or what your mother ate or what your father ate in the previous generation is going to impact what you will be in the later in life. That means, say this politically wrong, you can blame your parents. Your 4 times a walk to the quarters not helping you. We understand this well? No. Unfortunately, we know this happens. But we don't understand what is the right nutrition that has to be provided when you are doing development, or actually when the girl is in a pre-pregnant state. In fact, now there is an emphasis. We are not doing a lot of work on pre-pregnancy. That means the woman in a reproductively active age, you have to take care of her so that when the fetus grows, it gets the right nutrition, so that during breastfeeding that the child gets right nutrition, and so that that individual never become obese or develop cardiovascular disease later. So it's very well known that developmental nutrition actually leads to increase cancer, increase neurodevelopmental disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Name a human disease, it can be related to early childhood malnutrition or even fetal nutrition. That's an important aspect. There is also something called hunger. What is this hidden hunger? It's about, one is lack of availability of nutrition. The other one is our bodies are not absorbing enough nutrition. This is something that, for example, I've been discussing with both, Babu and Srinivas, and saying that we all talk about anemia, right? All people who are getting, who are anemic are getting iron tablets, but we're not been able to solve anemia because absorption of iron seems to be a problem. Children who are feeding with midday meals or whatever, even though they're getting high protein diet, they're not gaining body weight because probably there's an absorption problem. There's a utilization problem. How much of should be used for building body mass and burning energies? We don't know, right? These are important questions. All of this is therefore important for economy. So what we are tackling is developing indigenous methods, indigenous questions, indigenous characterization, human traits in the Indian population, so that we can solve our problems better than what the problems were solved anywhere else in the world. Something relevant. Our population, of course, hopefully will start stabilizing. Apparently, it started stabilizing now. The demographic right now is that our median age is about 29 right now. 47, which is the Amrit Kal Bharat, let's say, of the population would be around 42 years of age. This is a risk. Naturally, become more vulnerable to develop cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, cancer, everything by 40 to 50. If you are malnourished, the risk increases. Combine the two. There is a natural risk of developing obesity, diabetes, everything by 40 to 50 years. Add the malnutrition burden, most of our population will be category of becoming obese and diabetic. It's almost worse than the pandemic that we had. My concern is that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be sick, a lot of people who are going to die because of these diseases if we don't start taking corrective measures now and forever in the future. It's just numbers if people want to think about numbers. And this is where we are using this as an example of sometimes scientific activity is not about only generating money, it's also about saving money. Now, the amount, it's apparently There's about 500 million youth in India. Malnourished children, when they become adults, are known to earn between 20 to 30% less because they're intellectually less. And they're also physically less active, right? And in fact, the first thing that happens for a malnourished kid is that all your intellectual capacities decrease. That means they're not compromised, but they don't have the same STEM capacities. They're not good at math. They're not good at analytical methods. That means they will never become scientists. So you're fixing the population to be laborers forever. And laborer will eat malnourished food. Their kids will become less intelligent. They'll continue to be laborers. That's not fair, right? As a society, we have to make sure that we do things differently. So think about the cost for the economy. That's something that we did. And I did tell you about India has highest prevalence of malnutrition. See all the reds everywhere. And despite interventions, this is from the government's own data from what is called National Family Health Survey from, let's say, 2015 to 2020, nothing has changed. Basically, in some sense, many of those graphs have increased in number. So malnutrition is increased. That's a problem. So we need to solve this. And one of the things is resistance to intervention. Ultimately, what do we have? We know deficiencies exist. We know lean body mass, everything is there. But ultimately, unless you solve the middle part, which is systemic metabolism, energy expenditure, and what do you burn, you will not be able to address this. And we have to do all the way from pre-pregnancy to aging. Otherwise, again, you're going to give a part solution. And a part solution is never sufficient and good. Arunda activity started a long time ago. In fact, this has been kind of a life ambition for me and Mahendra. And but of course, pandemic put a lot of stop. But nonetheless, Vijay, who was then principal scientific advisor, inaugurated this. We now have in an MOU with DE and DBT because DBT is the largest organization now. Of course, I have dual loyalties, both DE and DBT, because TIFR is DE and CDFT is DBT, so I can also work with both systems. The idea is also to make sure that we not only do basic biology, because basic biology discovery is required, we also do human interventions to solve problems. We train next generation scientists. In fact, we have started a new, very innovative master program with Ashoka, where we are combining nutrition, metabolism with economics and social behavior. I'll tell you why this is important. Now, remember I told you the Derwan or the Konkan Rural Hospital where children are not drinking enough milk. Suppose tomorrow my research or let's say Arunda's research says that you have to eat in X amount of protein. We know whether every population in the country can afford X amount of protein? Economics. If the population cannot afford that, solution is useless. Let's say eat anda a day. Many families in India are vegetarian families. Right? So then is that a solution? That's not a solution. So we have to find solutions which takes into account economics and also cultural habits. If you don't take into these two, any policy change is going to be a good on paper, but it's never going to translate in terms of implementation. So we are doing a lot of these. We are also building capacity. We are building one of the first, for the first time, what is called a National Analytical Facility for Nutrition and Metabolism Research. It will provide service to everybody in the country. It doesn't matter whether you belong to this network or not. Everybody gets service. Even a plant biologist or a microbiologist can get access to this. We are also building several other platforms. I'm not going to go into the details. One of the things is using stable isotopes as better method. There again, what we are doing will probably revolutionize. Now, body composition is important. So suppose if I take a child who is malnourished and feed a lot of nutritious food, child will gain weight and probably become tall. But do I know whether this kid is gaining weight in the muscle or the fat? If the kid is gaining muscle mass, it's good. If the mass is increasing in adipose tissue, which is fat mass, the child is becoming obese. That means instead of solving a problem, I've created a new problem. This new problem, the kid has to bear the cost for the rest of the life. There's also this concept of what is called lean diabetes in India. I don't know if you've heard about this. In rest of the world, people become diabetes only when they're obese. In India, a large number of us are lean and yet we are diabetic. Understand this. That's because the amount of muscle mass to fat mass changes. By simply looking at an individual, you can't say whether how much of muscle mass and fat mass the individual has. One of the easiest techniques to do is what is called deuterated water. All of us can take deuterated water, measure body composition, because total body water is a beautiful measure of how much of muscle mass and fat mass you have. Imagine we are actually now doing this even in Anganwadis. That means you don't have to take the kid out of where they live, even to a tertiary healthcare center where DEXA scannings or all of these fancy methods exist, right? The other thing that we are building is, this is where most of even nutritionists miss the case, something called human energy expenditure or energy expenditure. Where we generate energy, we also expend energy. Walking actually expends energy. When you are talking, also energy expenditure happens. We don't understand how much of energy expenditure happens. So that means if I take X amount of calories, you walk and I walk, might be burning different amounts of calories. We don't understand how much different calories we are burning and why we are burning it differently. First is to understand how much calories we are burning, how much of energy expenditure happens. Always need to have a negative balance. Director will tell you, never have excess cash in your budget, because ZBSA will take away all the money. It's a problem. Zero balance accounts. DBT has zero balance accounts. March 31st, all the money you have in institute goes back to the RBI. Never have excess money. You make sure that your balance sheet is always negative. Typically, also you need to have a negative balance of energy. As long as you have negative energy of balance, it's good. So we don't understand. So we are building for the first time in India what are called human metabolic chambers. And for that, we have actually received CSR funds from Hindustan Unilever. Chambers exist only in developed countries or rich countries. In developing countries, this is the first ever such facility that we are establishing in CMC Vellore, because CMC Vellore is one of the best medical research organizations. So ultimately, what are we talking about? Insufficiency versus deficiency. We don't understand this. What do you mean by deficiency and insufficiency? They are very different things, right? It's also talking about fortification, but fortification and bioavailability is different. I can add a lot of micronutrients to your food. Whether you are absorbing it or not is a separate problem. So we need to take care of whether absorption happens or not. Second thing is knowing responders or non-responders. If we all feed, we all take the same multivitamin tablet, for some of us there will be benefit, so some of us there will not be benefit. In fact, for some of us, actually, daily vitamin tablets actually induces cancer. I don't know if you know that. Don't ever take this excessively, right? So there is another problem. So how do you know what is responders and non-responders, right? Some of us respond, some of us don't respond. About enhancing efficacy of intervention. That means if I provide intervention, how do I know it's making a difference to you? I need to know that. Also about informed dietary interventions, and called, is that India is a fantastic thing. In fact, the Honorable Minister also said yesterday there was a Genome India release, right, in a 1,000 genome project, like a human laboratory, right? India is the biggest human laboratory. I mean, I'm quoting him, because the amount of genetic diversity that we have in India, no other country has. The amount of dietary diversity we have in India, definitely no other countries have. If you combine the two, solve a problem for India, so solving a problem for the world. Because we are going to be fundamentally describing how genes and your diet interact with each other to give you why we are doing this. And in fact, local solution will have a global impact. Everything that we're going to do will also have an impact on other low and middle income countries. I'll say this and stop. ICMR, of course, all of us know ICMR. Many of the people didn't know ICMR existed before COVID. It brought ICMR to life in the real sense. And the DG ICMR contacted us, and we contacted him, and then he contacted us. Said that, like malnutrition is a problem, can we solve this? He said, look, I don't know what malnutrition is, because if I take a Punjabi kid and an Assamese kid, it's tall, the other one is stout. So just because the Assamese kid is shorter, can I call that kid obese? No. I need to look at metabolic fingerprinting. I don't know what is normative baseline for development in India. We don't have that data, right? Everything is based on Caucasian population. WHO charts are good, as reference, but whether they work with for all populations, not. So that's something that we are doing. We have recently established a Center for Advanced Research, as part of ARUMDA, where we are going to be studying 12,000 kids around India. Look at what do you mean by normative baseline for childhood development from 0 years to 19 years. It's a heroic effort. Nowhere else in the world this has been done. Definitely not in India, and we are going to do this so that we'll set up some baselines which will be reference for populations to do this. That's what we are, and of course, what are we doing with NGRI? One is purely technical, which sometimes work doesn't work. I request the director to please provide some extra incentive to my friends and colleagues here so that we can do this. And the reason I'm saying this is not simply because we want to utilize this facility, because what people don't realize is that it's the geophysics and the geochemistry that influences the nutrition fixing in plants and animals. Our food is directly coming from the same plants, animals, and microbes that are present in the soil. So if you don't understand the geophysics and geochemistry, including flow of water, everything, temperature, you don't understand whether a palak grown in south versus a palak grown in the north, whether they have the same nutrition capabilities. They may not have the same nutrition, right? Lentils grown in south, tur dal from south, tur dal from north will have totally different nutrition impact because there is geophysics and geochemistry involved. So can we actually use this as also a via media where in the long term we build a nice larger program where we combine geophysics and geochemistry with nutrition, agriculture and human health. That's why I also accepted this invitation, because I thought I might be able to pitch these ideas because these are important. Of course, one is technical. The other one is looking at trace elements measurements. But more importantly, this is something, and again, thanks to both Dr. Babu and Dr. Srinivas, made us aware about the differences in the amount of stable isotopes of iron that are present in different locations, and that different isotopes of iron are absorbed differently potentially in the human body, right? Now, why that's happening, that I will work as a biologist. Now, with help from NGRI, we can actually say what isotope of iron should I give to solve anemia. Taking an iron tablet will not help. In fact, iron with sulfate has a different impact than iron with citrate, than iron with acetate, because absorption is based on the chemical composition and the formulation that you have. Now, who can help us with that? In fact, you people can help. I'd like to combine these research to do this, and that's something that we're doing, including iron deficiency and isotope abundance. We had a call with Bill Gates Foundation yesterday, because I'm also connected with Bill Gates Foundation. In some sense, I advise them on many things. They are very interested in looking at iron biology. In fact, they're very excited to work on iron isotopes and stuff like that, and magnesium isotopes. Everything becomes relevant. So this is where biology and geophysics and geochemistry can combine. With that, I'll stop. All credit to my lab, which has been so far in TIFA, Bombay, and Hyderabad. There have been amazing bunch of people. They've never let go of scientific rigor, even though I've been busy doing many things, including administration. Thanks to a lot of funding, Gaganyaan, of course, with ISRO. That I'll stop, and thank you for your attention. It's been wonderful.
Any connection between malnutrition and pesticides?
So this is a fantastic question. So I was just made aware yesterday when we were on this discussion with Bill Gates Foundation in Mali, which I think you both have interacted with. But not with pesticides. We were thinking about microplastics has been now found in the placenta. Data coming from across the world and even from India, they have found microplastic particles or nanoplastics in placenta. The chain is so corrupted we're actually consuming, and it's crossing the fetal barrier and going into a placental barrier and going into the fetus, which is dangerous. Definitely yes. There are what are called in general in there's something called anti-nutrients. Right? Nutrients are those that inhibit uptake, utilization of nutrients. For example, calcium competes with iron for absorption. You should never take an iron tablet after a milk. Take it with acetate or citrate because absorption becomes much better, right? So there are a lot of these molecules which might short-term inhibit uptake of nutrition, or long-term reprogram your intestine not to absorb at all. Now, do I know if pesticides changes the villi architecture in the intestine? The villi architecture, I don't know if you know the intestine. The intestine has a lot of these undulating surfaces to absorb. Will that change? Probably yes. If it changes, will it have malnutrition? Of course. That means if I feed all these children all of those, but if the pesticide is stopping the uptake, I will never be able to solve the problem. Pesticides are relevant. Wonderful question. Yes.
So, like in future, are we going to face a antibiotic pandemic? Like
this is already happening. Antimicrobial resistance is a big scare. AMR is becoming the worst nightmare. Unfortunately, I know somebody whom one of my colleagues' father, who was a hale and healthy person, went into the hospital for open heart surgery. Surgery went very well. Developed a hospital infection and died 3 days later. Really sad. No antibiotic worked. And this is becoming a nightmare. So overuse of antibiotic is definitely a problem.
thank you, sir. So another just a question, like for children, as you said, the malnutrition is the biggest problem. So nowadays, the Cerelac, lactogen, all these things are becoming very famous. People are not taking fruits and all these things and taking this as a very, very special diet. They are telling, इसको पिला दो, इसको खिला दो, हो जाएगा. So what you are telling them?
So in general, unprocessed food is always better. And processed food is good because you want absorption to be rapid. I'm not talking about Cerelac as being good. Don't quote it. It is good because for a growing baby, you need rapid nutrition. In fact, right now, even Nestle and Unilever are talking about it. You know why? Because they're worried that whatever they're manufacturing now, later, because that will make them sicker. You can say, why are we talking to the industry? Money making. I tell you, given a choice, would you buy a ration shop rice or Pillsbury atta? So, whether we like it or not, all our consumption coming from products that are produced by these companies, even if they're bad, not bad. Let's say even if they're bad, it's good to engage with them and say what you're doing is wrong. Our data says that your nutrition is probably not good. So hopefully they will change their formulation. They will start with that's the hope. So we can't disengage them from the industry. We have to bring them into a fold and say what you're doing is right or wrong and let them correct it. If they don't correct, they will of course face the music.
Thank you. Thank you.
Again, rice fortified with iron. Across the board for all the
There's a lot of controversy, a lot of experts in the field, particularly who have done iron, told that that's not the best approach, right? For multiple reasons. One is iron toxicity is as bad as iron deficiency. Iron toxicity actually leads to even cancer, can lead to many other problems. Iron toxicity leads to gut dysbiosis, the major effect that happens. Toxicity also has neurological consequences. Now, the argument is when I'm fortifying iron, I'm not providing so much iron. Now, it's a double-edged weapon. So what people have seen is that if you don't give enough iron, absorption is not very high. That means what's the point of fortification with the sub concentration of iron, which anyway you're not absorbing. But the government's policy is that, look, at least so much iron is going. So there's a lot of debate there. Nobody knows exactly what. The problem is that all our iron deficiency is based on anemia. Quite possible that a lot of people who are anemic may not be iron deficient. People who are non-anemic can also be iron deficient. Iron is more than anemia. We don't understand that. So that's another important thing.
I have two questions which both of you addressed. First one is probably well by that.
Some of our very early work about, again, this was done in fruit flies. We also, us and many others are trying to see whether perception of food, smell, it changes. It does, right? Perception of food has a huge impact, and typically in flies and in all organisms tested, bitter food leads to better health. Because we are programmed to think that we eat bitter food only when there is no food. When we eat bitter food, when there is nothing else to eat, you're forced to eat bitter food. So bitter food seems to evoke certain responses. Either they're percept or sensory based, or there are molecules that act on receptors that actually give better health. Both
The second question I want to ask is about the genetic diversity which you mentioned again. But does it really, I mean, like Indians, we are like genetic part all over the world. So, I mean, how do we really design programs? Because the genetic diversity is all we take in ASI. I mean, there are so much of genetic diversity.
So what we know is that if genetic diversity was the biggest contributor, only Africans should have become obese or diabetic. Only Americans should have become diabetes or only Indians should have. It's not. It means genetics is only playing a low risk or a high risk. But ultimately, it's your diet that is overriding all of that. So therefore, categorizing them as risk groups rather than absolute determinants is important. Once you categorize them as risk groups, you can then say whether this calorie will work better or that calorie. That's the idea. First of all, we need to understand how many metabolic groups exist and how many genetic groups exist. If you don't even characterize that, I can't answer that question. We have not characterized that. Anyways, when you have metabolic overload, your biological age is always higher than chronological age. That's very well known, right? Like I said, this is a study that didn't show because I wanted to keep it light on science because I didn't know how much of biology. So one of the things that operates, we have done a lot of work on what is called calorie restriction. Calorie restriction. That comes from a fundamental principle that when we were in the wild, we never had continuous access to diet. When you calorie restrict, your health always becomes better. The reason is when you're calorie restricted, your evolution is tuned in such a way that you want to survive longer because you want to reproduce. Ultimately, biology cares about reproducing its own kind. All of us are not important. Things are important, not. Only as important as propagating the species. Fundamental biology property. None of us are important except for carrying forward the human race. Everything else is immaterial. In that philosophical point of view. Biological point of view, when you're calorie restricted, you didn't have food. If you reproduce, what's going to happen? Chance of your offspring surviving is less because there's no food. First, you're competing for the same food with your offspring. Then chance of survival of a species is almost zero. Therefore, when there is let's say starvation or calorie restriction, you become better healthy because you want to survive as an individual because you're not reproducing. In the hope that when you get food, you reproduce and die. Concept. In humans, why there is more diseases is because we live much longer than our reproductive age. Our reproductive age ends at 30 to 40. Live until 70. That's another problem. No other species or very few species lives much long after reproductive age. It's again a conundrum that humans, so that means brain development happened, you all became intellectual, we are paying the price. Basically, calorie restriction is important. What we have worked is with all the genetic mechanisms that give anti-aging. We have done that. We should not stop aging, please. I believe that it's good for all of us to die one day. I think, thankfully, this is where, whether you believe in God or not, I think biology operates like a God. No biological process is, every biological process, every time it happens, there is an error. That means it's almost like by design, there's been an error-prone mechanism. Why? It's not because probably God existed. I do say, but I don't want to invoke God for science. The reason is that if you didn't have error, you wouldn't evolve. We came from monkeys to humans because mutations happened in the genes. Mutations happened because there was nutrition and everything that came in. So that means error was useful for evolution. So that error is also killing us. So therefore, I don't think we'll ever be able to get rid of. What is our all research is to make sure that you live as healthy as possible until you die, because one day we all die.
So, one last question we'll take from.
Thank you, sir, for the enlightening talk. So I have two questions. So first question is, I kind of forgot the question. When you are doing weight loss programs or something like that, so what happens is that initially there is a gradual weight loss, but after a certain time, then the same amount of exercise does not reduce the weight. Why is that? First question. And second question is, individually, we do not understand how much food will affect our body mass and how much exercise will affect our body mass. And on these questions, in this respect, this metabolic chamber that we have opened in CMC, can it be able to answer those questions for an individual, and how
Good question. So in fact, we are combining T2O method, total body water. We are combining what is called DEXA, which is a scanner. So there's something called compartment models, right? Your body weight is based on your mineral mass, get this, bone density, muscle mass, fat mass, amount of water we have. So your body can be compartmentalized into 3 compartments, 4 compartments, 5 compartments, and even 7 compartments. 5 is better, 7 becomes a little too much, right? So by doing different body composition measurements, we can actually say how much of weight is present in each of these compartments. That's an important aspect. Very few people in the world can do it, and we want to do this, and we are doing it right now. So that means if you stop losing weight, is it because your bone density is stabilized? Fat density is stabilized? The muscle density? We don't know that. Simply weight doesn't change. So one of the things we are doing right now is using double labeled water and DEXA and all of that to do this. Now, DEXA, not all of us can go and sit, and it's also not good because it's radiation. And it's also expensive. So that's why we want to set up D2O based thing for population-wide studies. Second thing is, everybody can go and sit in the human metabolic chambers. I mean, each of those chambers are expensive, like the most expensive hotel room you can think about. It's a 5 crore rupee hotel room. 5 crore rupees, and we're building 2 of those. So we can't do that. So instead, what we're going to use, what is called double labeled water. You have D2O18. 18 is again a naturally occurring isotope. And your deuterium is lost from the body through both air, so largely through urine, because that's where your water will go out, right? Oxygen is lost both through urine and by exhalation. The rate of decay of deuterium as an isotope and the rate of decay of oxygen as an isotope, that difference gives you energy expenditure. Use that to do population-wide studies without making any of you sit through the metabolic chamber. There are advantages. In a metabolic chamber, you are confined. I don't know whether you are doing the exercise in the morning or evening. Whereas if I make you drink double labeled water, you can do whatever. I can actually measure how much is your total energy expenditure more accurately in a real life situation than when you're sitting in a chamber. That's something that you're doing right.
So we'll take one last question from sir, I think. Okay. So further discussion can be done during the nutritional high tea we'll have after this. So thank you so much, sir, for such an eye-opening talk, which is now may I request Dr. Prakash Kumar, Director CSIR NGRI, to felicitate our chief guest.
I don't think I'll get this insurance. Thanks a lot.
Now may I request Dr. Shiv Shankar Ganguly to please deliver vote of thanks.
Thank you, Varnita. So good evening, respected director, distinguished guest today, speaker, Professor Ullas Kolthur Seetharam, and also senior colleagues, retiree who joined online, offline both. So today we are celebrating here the National Science Day lecture. And on behalf of CSIR-National, I would like to pay a deep sense of gratitude to our guest speaker today, who enlightened us and taking through the journey of the malnutrition and how the critical factors that affects in India and what are the parameters that are important, which can be taken up in the future. And also the Arunda mission you talked about, that's a very noble mission, and we wish you best with that, and hope India will one day will come with some kind of solutions to the malnutrition and the other related issues that we are facing. So thank you so much, sir, for your very phenomenal talk. And with the response from a very non-background of biology, we can say that that was a phenomenal talk. So thank you so much. And next is there are many people behind who made this event successful. So we'd like to thank, it is our moral responsibility to thank them. So there are electricity department, information section, AC section, canteen, and name it anyone if I'm forgetting. So all those in the back helped this event to be successful. Thank you so much. And thank you all the audience here, offline, online, both, that you be here and witness this successful event. Thank you so much. So next would be the national anthem. So please rise for the national anthem. Jana Gana Mana Adhinayaka Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravida Utkala Banga Vindha Himachala Yamuna Ganga Uchala Jaladhi Taranga Tava Shubha Name Jage Tava Shubha Ashish Mage Gahe Tava Jaya Gatha Jana Gana Mangala Dayak Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Jaya He Jaya He Jaya He Jaya 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 Jaya. Thank you. IT is waiting outside. The car parking.